and coming over to Ybor for our director's conversation about what our universe looks like going on into fiscal 18 and beyond. You may have seen at some of our board meetings and definitely here for the directors some of our conversations about the financial pressures that we're facing, and some points to stress: we're not alone. Ridership across the country is down, and that means less fare revenue. Healthcare, we've all seen our own healthcare expenses go up, and we've been talking about that. Just the cost of doing business is going up, and our revenues have not really grown. Again, we're not alone on this one. You can read now how our friends at Hillsborough County are looking at their budget for next year. Police and fire, how are they looking at that? And with recent legislation coming down from Tallahassee, voters will have the option to extend the homestead exemption for ad valorem next year. That could be about a $28 million impact to Hillsborough County and about another $2 million to us, $1.5 million to $2 million. So the world that pays for our service is different. The world of consuming our service is also different. We've seen ridership loss across our system on heavy hauling routes, on some of our commuter routes. We've just seen a real change in how folks are using service. We have seen an impact from neighborhoods changing. We've seen an impact from rideshare. We've seen non-traditional rideshare. So we've just seen a change in that universe. So how do we stay relevant? You're aware also that over the past 3 years, we've been doing some really interesting things, some innovative things, some coming from your executive team. So Jeff volunteering us for our regional fair, integrated regional fair, which like even Dallas is going to implement that a year after we do, which is pretty cool. Mike Sheldon got really interested in recycling and was going to bring in blue boxes himself, and that was support for our recycling program. William Moselle decided to tackle real-time optimization on runs and paratransit. That's better service for folks, saves us some money. So from top to bottom at all these different levels of the organization, we've brought forth different ideas to do business differently. And I want to anchor us into that so we remind ourselves talking about the budget being tight is not an, oh my gosh, we woke up today. This is really the next evolution in this 3-year process of we know we can do business differently. We know we can get ahead of technology, and we can be responsible for where it goes as opposed to having it sort of foisted on us. And we know that we are a small team, but we are mighty, and we can tackle these challenges. So where we are is the next step in this evolution, which is a reset of how we do business. And going back to the examples with Mike Sheldon and Bill Moselle, this is everyone in the team is here. Everyone at this table is an expert, subject matter expert in your field. So is your staff. We're all pulling together to continue this evolution of what it means to be the tax dollar recipient and get folks around when they're not driving themselves. Whether they have the option or they just choose not to do that, that's what we do. That's our core mission. And again, we've been looking at interesting ways to do business for 3 years. Your exec team's also been looking at finances for about the past year and a half. When you see a change in what your healthcare looks like, it's because we're monitoring that budget. When you see consultants coming in and helping us look at what legal services we have inside versus what specialties make more sense for us to use a little bit of the time that Sylvia's shop works at, this is part and parcel of this whole process of your executive leadership with a lot of work from our directors, the folks at this table, being ready to pivot to the next step for the evolution. So I'm beating this to death, but I really want us to stress it's not we're just going to do this year. It's a change to how we do business. It's a change in looking at what we're doing and how we're doing it and why. So to Colin's previous point, it's not just looking at how do we train better. It's looking at what's the goal of a training program and rowing to that. It's not looking at can we get buses on the street faster in Jim's shop? It's saying what's the best size of our fleet for us to maintain and what's the best age to maintain and delivering that. And why is this important? Every single person here wants to be excellent in what we do. We take pride in being at an organization that despite the fact we're not well funded, we knock it out of the park. Everything we do, not just for our folks riding, but for folks working with us, our business partners and our taxpayers, everything we should do should be excellent, flawless execution every single time. And in previous years, the decisions to put every dime on the street has complicated that for us. So we have not ever been an organization with a big bank account, but that's meant that we can't weather some storms. That's meant that we extended the life of the fleet, and so our buses are older and harder to maintain. It's also meant that we haven't invested a lot in training for our folks, that we've had years where there weren't raises or pay for performance because we didn't know we could afford that. It is a time to reboot and become the organization that we know we can do these things and we have the bank account for what we commit to do for our community. It's also a commitment that we have this conversation in 2018, and that's our foundation to go forward. So we don't make minor tweaks in 18 and come back in 21 or 24. It's that we change how we do business so we can meet the needs of our community and be on a stable footing to continue to take this excellence into the future. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff to get down into the weeds at this point.
Thank you, Catherine. So in preparation for the budget in 2018, something that we talked with the board about, and the conversation has been around the pressures that we as an organization are facing in the development of that budget. And as Catherine had mentioned, we are seeing some pressures that other organizations across the country and actually worldwide in transit are seeing as far as ridership and the ability to grow that ridership. So some of the pressures that we have going into FY18 isn't just expenses, it's also on the revenue side. We're seeing declines in ridership, 11% decline in ridership since 2014. That decline in ridership also equates to lack of revenue generated by fares and passes. So that's something that we're looking at having to prepare for next year, less revenue coming in the door as far as ridership is concerned. Along with the revenue side, property taxes and our property valuations and all of our property tax bills going into next year will be a little higher. Property values are looking at increasing anywhere between 8 and 8.5% in Hillsborough County. So what does that mean for HART? For HART, that means about $2.9 million of additional revenue over what we have collected in the current fiscal year. However, we made a commitment to the board that any additional revenues over what we collected over the prior year, particularly in property taxes, will be dropped to the bottom line or into our piggy bank. So even though that's great that the revenue has increased on that side, we have made the commitment with the board that we're going to not appropriate that money to be spent. So why would we make that commitment? Over the last 4 years, we have actually taken out of that piggy bank. So every year that our expenditures and what we're paying is more than what we have coming in, we have to go into that piggy bank and balance ourselves out at the end of the year. Just like a household checking account. If you are overdrawing your checking account, you're going to be pulling out of savings to be able to make ends meet. So why have we had to pull out of our piggy bank over the last few years? Again, Catherine referred to our increases in healthcare that all organizations are seeing, both public and private. We are not immune to that whatsoever. We have seen great increases in our healthcare expenditures over the last few years to the tune of well over $4 million a year that we have overspent what we anticipated we were going to spend in that claims activity. So that's a huge pressure for next year, which has to be mitigated. We also have our collective bargaining agreements that the board has approved. That's an additional $4.9 million of contractual obligations that we have to pay for our collective bargaining units, wages and benefits over a 3-year period. So for FY18, that's an additional $1.9 million of additional expense that we have to budget for. So we still have increases in our overall personnel costs, our fringes, our liability insurance. We're self-insured. So what does that mean? It means that we don't have an insurance company to come in and bail us out either on the healthcare claim side or the accident side. We are our own insurance company. So we have to be able to budget appropriately to make sure that we can carry those risks as we move forward. So what does that mean going into fiscal year 18? A couple of different things. We have budgeted an additional $4 million in healthcare for next year to balance ourselves out of what we have been spending in healthcare. We added an additional $1 million in our general liability expenses due to increases in that claims activity as far as accidents. Someone trips and falls, one of our buses gets into an accident. Those claims can get expensive. And over the last couple of years, we have overspent what we budgeted in that arena. Our taxi voucher program has become extremely popular in Hillsborough County, and that's great news. It will require us to add additional funding to that in FY18, which we are very happy to do, based on the fact that adding money to the taxi voucher program actually decreases the amount of money that we would have to put in to our paratransit program to the tune of about $2 million. So for $1 million of additional taxi voucher, we're actually saving $2 million of what we would have to put into our paratransit program. So that's a huge cost savings overall, but it is an increase to next year's budget. So what have we talked to the board about? And what have we talked publicly of where we stand budgetarily? Some of this has changed since the last time we had an opportunity to talk to the board. But when we first started the budgeting process back in late February, early March, we were looking at a $13 million deficit for FY18. And by deficit, what I mean is there was a $13 million gap between our revenues and what we were expecting and planning on having to spend in the next fiscal year. So I want to be careful about the word deficit. Florida law does not allow any governmental entity in the state of Florida to run into the red. Unlike our federal government, we cannot spend money that we know don't have or we don't have access to. So deficit in this conversation is a paper gap that we have right now of what we plan on bringing in revenue-wise and what we plan on expending. So how do we narrow that gap and decrease that? A couple of ways thus far that we've been able to do that. We started with a zero-based budgeting process this year where all the working units, managers, supervisors, directors were asked to develop a budget from the ground up, from zero up. We've taken that information, we've compared that against actual over the last few years, what we've really spent, and gone through the budgets and started to eliminate some of those over-budgeted items that we historically have not spent what we had planned on spending. We've gone through some processes. We've looked at multiple internal processes looking at cost savings. We have gapped some FTEs, vacancies only. At this point, any vacancy that we have available, we've looked at it through a mission-critical lens. Is that position necessary to fill, and does it support our primary mission, which is keeping buses and vehicles on the road? If the answer is no, then we're looking at either not filling it, looking at possibly eliminating that vacant position going into the next fiscal year, or repurposing it. As a matter of fact, one of our positions that in finance that I gapped this year, we are going to repurpose in Kenyatta's group. So we don't have to ask the board for another FTE. We have an FTE. We're going to repurpose it and move it to another department. So we're looking at those type of movements going into the year as well. So although in the slide that we presented to the board, we brought that $13 million down to about 8.5. Since that conversation, we brought that 8.5 down to about 6. But that's a hard 6. It's going to take a lot more work to be able to get past that to 0. So what are we doing and what are we looking at to be able to eliminate that $6 million gap? One, we are continuing an analysis of all of our internal processes. Something that I have told my folks time and time again is that our core mission is keeping buses on the road. Any ability to reduce the amount of overhead to support that function is extremely important. So what I mean by overhead? The overhead support functions of an organization typically look at finance, human resources, information technology, legal, those type of functions that support the organization. So we're really looking hard at all of those processes to see how we can maybe do business differently, how we can reduce that footprint, and allow more money to be moved to service than we could otherwise. Again, we're looking at all non-critical FTE vacancies going into next year. Healthcare. I had mentioned earlier that we're adding $4 million to next year's budget due to our healthcare claims increases. We're looking at multiple models of delivering that activity differently, possibly piggybacking on another governmental entity, looking at possibly not staying self-insured anymore. I mentioned that earlier, where we are our own insurance company. Perhaps there's a different model that we could do. So Kenyatta and her folks are looking at what would be best for this organization and its employees moving into the future that we could reap some cost benefit from. And then the big component of our organization that we're looking at is our service model. Looking at our overall service footprint in Hillsborough County and to those that we serve, looking at underutilized routes, looking at a better way to get that service out that would, one, increase our efficiency and productivity, and at the same time saving the organization and taxpayers money and allowing us to narrow that gap going into fiscal year 2018. So where are we right now with the budgeting process? We are preparing to go back before the board with a tentative budget on June the 5th. In the next 2 weeks leading up to that, we are going to be meeting with every business unit, their leadership, the managers, directors, and chiefs, and going through line for line for line on their budgets. And we're looking for more savings. The transit development plan is being presented to the board on the June 5th board meeting as well. We're looking at what that footprint will mean as far as service and how that will be budgeted going into the year. July 17th, we set the tentative millage, and the millage rate is what the taxpayers on their tax bill will pay in property tax for HART services. By our charter, it's set at 0.5 mils. It can go no higher than that. So staff is recommending that we keep the millage exactly where it is right now. August 7th, we take final proposed to the board. And that budget, one, has to have that $6 million reduced to zero or below zero. We already have to have the plan in place. We have to be able to present it to the board no later than August 7th. And then in September, we go through our public hearing process where the board will hold 2 public hearings in the evening for citizens to come and listen and comment on the budget if they are so inclined. And then at the very last public hearing in September, the 2018 budget is adopted. October the 1st, the fiscal year begins, and we start the process for the 2019 budget development.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. So HART is currently in the process of a comprehensive operational analysis, a COA, which is really the snapshot or an analysis looking at the current services provided by HART. And we're also, as Jeff mentioned, in the process of a TDP, or the Transit Development Plan. And that takes the long-term look at HART services. And so coupling of these efforts is beneficial because the COA resets our HART services we currently provide and provide a platform for future expansion that's included in the TDP. The COA helps to streamline the service, making the routes more efficient, more direct, lessening the rider travel time, and eliminating unnecessary miles. And so HART will be looking to reallocate resources from lower performing routes to higher performing bus routes in an upcoming realignment of our transit network in an effort to reduce or reverse, if you will, the ridership decline. And of course, a continued investment in productive routes will help stem the decline in ridership. And according to national studies, the major factors in contributing ridership decline across the countries include the falling gas prices, the rise of housing prices, a post-recession employment changes, many things that impact ridership. So the fundamental strategy for the proposed redesign of the transit network is to shift service from the low-performing routes to area where there is a higher demand, and in an effort to better meet the community's needs by matching limited funding with ridership demand. So the plan aims to strike that balance between providing efficient and convenient service and being as cost-effective as possible. And with that, I'll turn it to Kenyatta.
Well, as all of you know, we had an actual reorg on May 15th of 2017. The goal of the reorg was to align everybody's positions within a certain functional area to ensure that we would be able to sustain ourselves for the future, and also to ensure that things that were commonality within departments were together to support our overall efforts of what we're trying to accomplish. And as a part of that, as we're working towards that, we're asking all of our employees to get buy-in, to be engaged in the process. This is not a process that we can do alone. It's not a process that anybody can like shoulder lift and push over the goal line by themselves. We're going to be looking at every particular function on top of that as far as a monetary value to ensure that all of those things are being done appropriately and efficiently and most cost effectively we can do. So we're going to ask each of you to work with your teams to inspire employee engagement and to also work with them to understand the process that we're undertaking. Because a part of this process is that everybody's going to need to understand from a communication standpoint as well. So we're going to be working with the newly created communications team as well as the marketing services that we are having on board this month to kind of push out those types of things. Because if our employees don't know why they're doing the work that they're doing, they're not going to be able to do it to their greatest ability. And we're charging our directors to ensure that they create cultures of teamwork and also collaboration, and also moving forward into the next era of transit management. Because without that, we won't be able to sustain ourselves for the future. And the fact that we're supporting an innovative and creative environment means that we have to ensure that our employees are inspired to do that as well. So when you're engaging with your employees to ensure that they're being high performers and also appreciating them, we have programs that we're developing as far as One Heart. That was something that we kicked off this year to ensure that our employees understand that they're not along in this process and they're not just regular run-of-the-mill employees. We want them to understand that they are cared for and they're cared about. So we're really trying to kick off a different approach of what we're doing from administrative function services to ensure that the employees are moving towards and understanding why they're here at HART, that they're cared for, and what the importance of what they're doing for the community. Because without that, they may not do their best work. And I see sometimes a disconnect on employees understanding or being disengaged. And in order for us to create that high-performing team, we have to have our employees engaged. So with that, the organizational reset from a standpoint of what positions was kind of developed to inspire that creativity and innovation and collaboration moving forward for the organization.
So I get to wrap it up. So we all have a role to play as we're moving forward in this process to get us, I don't want to say to the best HART that we can be, but to take this really outstanding, awesome team and get us to that area where we can innovate and we have the tools we need on every level of the organization. You have the resources for you to be successful, that you can own your success. You have a culture of accountability. Your folks know what's expected of them. We reward the accountability and we continue to go forward. Our team is a good combination of folks who've been here for a while and folks who are newer to the organization. And a point that we've made a lot is we want to be an employer of choice. It's also time to be the agency that we want to come to work at, with a culture where we want to come to work, where we can build collaboratively for the decisions that we need to be innovative, to be flexible, to go into this new era of being a little more nimble, a little leaner, a little flatter, so there are fewer levels between the folks who are making decisions and the folks who are carrying out the decisions. Just a better integrated team that's in a good position to get to that sound financial footprint, but deliver this high-quality service that our patrons need and be the place that we all want to work at. So everybody at the organization has a role to play here. We're only going to be successful if we're all going in the same direction. And to Kenyatta's point, this is where the chiefs, the directors, and the managers are critical. It is our responsibility to answer the questions and make sure that throughout the organization, that we can tie back every initiative we're doing to the goal of having excellent service on the road and saving up for a future where we can expand and do the best we can here in Hillsborough County. It's a scary process. When we're looking at doing every single process differently or maximizing on the business side, this process is already starting in finance and administration. We've done parts of it in executive office and then also operations. It is frightening. Some of these positions we're not going to be doing in-house anymore, but we're doing this from a perspective that we have as much warning as possible, so everyone here has the best decisions available to them. Are they sticking with the organization? And how can the organization support them in what they want to do? Again, so it's a little nerve-wracking, but we are well positioned for this. You always hear me say this. This is absolutely the best team in transit. We're going to be able to do this together. Most of us will never have this chance again to remake our organization. And realistically, we're remaking the industry. You can read that LA is starting this. You can read that our peers in Houston have looked at their routes. We're one of the few agencies looking at everything at the same time to make sure that we are cutting edge. It's going to be a lot of work, but we're all going to have the ability to look back and know that we made that difference, not just for Hillsborough County, but for what our industry is doing around the country. So let's work hard and get this done and do it together. Thank you.